Democrats opposing Nancy Pelosi as House Speaker have finally gone public with that letter they've been talking about for the last several days. The letter was signed by 16 Democrats, 11 current members, 4 incoming members, and Utah's Ben McAdams, who had declared victory over Republican Congresswoman Mia Love in a race that has not yet been called. Democrats are expected to hold 232 seats in the next Congress, with 5 races still undecided. If the current math holds and no member votes present, Pelosi could afford to lose just 14 Democrats. In addition, there are other members who say they are opposed to another Pelosi speakership who have not signed the letter.
But, Jackie, of course, we don't know even who wrote the letter. Nobody's taking credit for that. So I guess the question is, even with these 14 signatures on the letter, how strong is Nancy Pelosi's position inside the Democratic caucus this morning?
I mean, it's hard really to tell until a vote actually takes place here. But I just want to come back to something that Diana DeGette had told Kasie Hunt on Sunday, which is that you really can't beat somebody with nobody. And that's sort of the position we're in right now. Obviously, Nancy Pelosi and her office are taking this very seriously. They are meeting with as many people as possible, trying to forge strong alliances. And you even see very progressive House Democrats like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez say that, you know, in her opinion, Pelosi is the most progressive out of the options, although there aren't too many options that have presented themselves. But, you know, I do want to point out here that out of those 16 signees, 14 of them are men. Only 2 of them are women. It is really hard to look at this without seeing that sort of disparity. I asked Michael Steele, the former RNC chair, if he thought these attacks on Pelosi were gendered. And he responded to me that he quite frankly thought that, you know, people at the end of the day do have a problem with women in position of power.
A group of Senate Democrats have launched a legal challenge against President Trump's appointment of Matt Whitaker as acting attorney general. Senators Richard Blumenthal, Mazie Hirono, and Sheldon Whitehouse filed their lawsuit in Washington, D.C. They argue the move by the president violates the Constitution because Whitaker has not been confirmed by the Senate. The lawsuit marks the 3rd legal action challenging Whitaker's appointment in less than a week. All 3 are seeking a federal court to rule that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is the legal and constitutional successor to former Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
Hey, Sam Stein, this is your reporting in the Daily Beast about this lawsuit brought by the senators. So what we have here, and let's get really down in the weeds here, is you've got the Appointments Clause versus the Vacancies Reform Act, which is the debate here between whether or not there should be appointment, there should be Senate confirmation for this appointment, or if the president has the right under this vacancies for 210 days to appoint whomever he wants without Senate confirmation.
I could feel the viewers flipping the channel at this point.
No. They love this stuff.
The Appointments Clause versus the Vacancy Reform Act. Yeah, the basic gist was Matt Whitaker appointed unconstitutionally because senators did not get to weigh in on this. Under the Vacancies Reform Act, you can put someone in a position for up to 210 days, but the question is can you do that for a principal officer, someone who reports directly to the president, which Matt Whitaker as acting AG would do? The senators argued that no, you can't. It's the argument that George Conway and Neil Katyal did produce in their New York Times op-ed, arguing that this appointment was unconstitutional. The question they're going to have to confront, I'm no lawyer, the question I think they'll have to confront, I should say, is whether they have standing. Standing is, can you prove that you were affected adversely by this appointment? And these senators will say, yeah, well, our constitutional rights to advise and consent were violated by this. The president circumvented it. He went around us, and therefore Matt Whitaker cannot serve in this position. This will go to a court, obviously. The judge, I don't know how he or she will rule on the matter, but inevitably it will, well, not inevitably, it could very well get kicked up to the Supreme Court, where they will have to decide whether Matt Whitaker could actually be in that position where he is overseeing the Mueller probe without any Senate confirmation whatsoever.
So, Michael Schmidt, let me bring you in here. Let's just get an overview of where we are in the Mueller investigation. A lot of ground noise. We don't know how much signal is getting through. Give us, if you can, give us just a quick 30,000-foot look at where the best guess is for where the Mueller investigation is right now.
So despite all the noise around Whitaker, the investigation is still being overseen by Rod Rosenstein and Rosenstein's deputy Ed O'Callahan. They are still, the people that are overseeing it. And Mueller's folks are continued focused on the biggest question here of collusion, and that is an investigation heavily focused on Roger Stone. Was Roger Stone someone who was simply boasting and bragging about connections to WikiLeaks that he did not have? Or was he really talking to them, and was there really coordination? And Mueller's folks are spending a lot of time on this, talking to a lot of different people, using all the tools that they have. And if you take a step back from all of the things that have gone on that we've looked at, we still haven't seen an answer to that central question of, collusion. And it may take them many more months to do that. You have to remember, Mueller does not want to ever shut down, close up shop without turning over every single stone.
All right, Michael Schmidt, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And Mika, there is, speaking of the Mueller investigation, a great Lawfare article out yesterday talking about the Watergate roadmap that really delves into a lot of really eerie similarities between the Nixon White House and the Trump White House on improper White House Justice Department contacts. That's a must-read.
Check it out, lawfare.com. Coming up, U.S. diplomats targeted overseas by so-called sonic attacks, leaving them with brain injury and hearing loss. Russia was thought to be the culprit, but the mystery is still unsolved. We'll have some new reporting on that next.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.